Well, hello, and welcome to Trash with a Capital T, where we give trashy books and movies the love they truly deserve. I'm your host, Bobby, and I post new videos here every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Occasionally, I'll do a special release on Wednesday, same time, but I'm going to try and cut down on those because they don't perform very well, and I think they kind of get just lost in the shuffle. So, trying to keep it to four videos a month. Um, so, first video of the new year. And as this channel is still trying to kind of find its identity and its footing, um, I definitely think this is turning more into like a nostalgia channel, which works. I by the time this comes out, I'm going to be 41, so definitely hitting that kind of midlife crisis. So instead of getting a Porsche, I'm just rereading a bunch and rewatching old movies that I liked when I was a kid and a teenager. Um, okay, so today we are going to be talking about an author who I truly loved growing up. I devoured every book of his I can get my hands on, and I thought if I was going to do this, I was going to have to start with his first book. This book is almost as old as I am. Christopher Pike is the author, and the book that I am going to be talking about today is Slumber Party. Now, I don't know if this is his actual first published book. He also wrote, I think I talked about it in my YA recommendations video. He also wrote a book, the second book in a long-running non-thriller series, the Cheerleaders series, not to be confused with R.L. Stein's Fear Street Cheerleader books. It was like a YA drama series, kind of like Sweet Valley High. He wrote the second one called Getting Even. I don't know if that came out before or after this, but it came out the same year as this. This was published in 1985. This is his first thriller. Now, this is under the point horror or point thriller line. This definitely leans more towards thriller over outright horror. This is not a particularly violent book. It does kind of push some boundaries as it comes to like characters talking about like sex and relationships and drinking and smoking and stuff like that. But it actually is fairly tame as far as violence goes, which for the point books, it was hidden. It depended on who you were reading, but most of them were around the same level. Pike just is a little bit spicier than those guys. Although with this one, you only get hints of what was to come later on with his stuff. And we'll talk about some of those books because I have some in front of me. We'll talk about those books kind of at the end of the video. So the basic gist of this one, we have a group of young women. They're like 17, 18 years old, end of high school, who are going to be having a big party at this girl Nell's house. They were a group of friends who have known each other for years, but there's some tension in the group because of something that happened at a slumber party 8 years prior that resulted in the death of Nell's sister. We have Laura, our main character, who's kind of the all-American good girl, who's looking to just kind of have fun and maybe get a little wild and meet a boy on this trip. And then we have Dana, her friend, who's just kind of there. She doesn't really get to do much, and she actually vanishes pretty quickly. So she just seems like a nice girl who's just trying to have a good time. Then we have Rachel, the mean girl of the group, who is tall, blonde, pretty, very flirty. Without calling her definitely the most sexually active of the group, I only mention that because it comes up a lot. And then her little minion, Mindy, who really wants a man. Like, have you ever seen Roger Rabbit? That, like, it's a man lady. That's her. That's Mindy. Sorry for the goofy voice. I make a lot of those. You guys just don't see them. And then, of course, we have our hostess, Nell, who, after the incident at the slumber party 8 years before, was horribly scarred, and part of her face has been reconstructed. She is slowly trying to reconnect with the group, but has also kind of become a shut-in. There is an extra addition to this group for this particular party, a young woman named Celeste that Lara has befriended, and no one knows a ton about her, but she seems very nice. She's a little younger, very sweet. But her and Nell, once they meet, it's obvious there's some history there, but no one knows exactly what. I'm guessing from my description alone, you guys could figure it out, but we'll get into it. Slumber Party is not Pike's best book, but it is very interesting to see where he started. you could see where he's pushing boundaries a little bit. Point wasn't really known for going over the top. They could go goofy, they could go campy, but their books were still relatively safe. This was, when I say YA, in 80s, 90s YA term, we're talking really about 13 to 16, 17, maybe even a little younger. YA now is a very different genre. It appeals to a much wider age group. It really just means the characters are going to be younger. So you're going to be dealing with teenage characters or early 20s characters, late high school to, mid to late high school to college. Teen fiction was very different back in the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s. It really wasn't until Harry Potter kind of changed that and just expanded that world. And then you saw it with the Hunger Games, Twilight, where you saw an older audience come in. At this point, these books were really made. These were cheap paperbacks that were made for young readers to read quickly. And they were published very rapidly. These were almost treated like you see with like Harlequin or category romance, where they have a regular monthly schedule where they're going to have a specific number of books released every month. And you would see that through series like Point Horror. Point also had a romance line. There were actually Harlequin, I think Silhouette had a YA line, a teen line. Harlequin, I think, had one as well, but it was called something else and I can't remember what it is. Then you had some other stuff, Fear Street, which was R.L. Stine's series. But the majority of these series were written by a wide variety of authors that kind of stuck on theme. And that's where you get Point Horror. Point Horror is very fondly remembered. And a lot of great YA authors and teen audience authors. These authors were not teens when they wrote these books, by the way. They were all probably in their 40s and 50s. These were definitely for higher writers. They were coming in. You got some great... Carolyn B. Cooney worked for Point Horror. R.L. Stine did. Christopher Pike did 3 books for Point. I think he did Slumber Party, Weekend, and I think Chain Letter was originally released through Point. And then was later re-released through Archway, which was Simon & Schuster's teen imprint. Diane Ho did several books for Point Horror and actually did like a sub-series for them called Nightmare Hall. You saw a lot of really well established kid, middle grade, and teen writers working in Point Horror. And that line became extremely popular, not only in the US, but also in the UK, where it was so popular that after it ended in the US, you actually saw UK spin-offs like Point Horror, I think it's Horror Unlimited or Horror Extreme, I think it's Unlimited. You saw titles being released over there with authors like Graham Masterton writing books for it. He did House of Bones for that one. I've read some of those. They're quite good, but they definitely skew a little older and don't necessarily feel like teen fiction. I think I read... What did I read? Eve's Party, and I really loved it, but it's very British. These books, the original Point Horror line was very much set in the US. These are all-American kids having all-American problems with all-American monsters. Violence was there, but we're not talking blood and guts. We're talking, like, if someone gets murdered, it's usually off-page. Sex... This book, the characters do have sex drives. They actually acknowledge that sex exists. Not all the authors push that. I will say, when you get to this one, this book is horny. Not so much here. This was definitely him just kind of testing the waters. Overall, this one works. I'm not going to get too spoilery, but I mean, the plot is pretty boilerplate as far as these go. The twist, you could see a mile away. What kind of surprised me with this is I really enjoyed the writing. For the most part, the ending of this book gets a little wonky. And I think that's partially because when Pike initially submitted this book to his editor or his agent, before it was sold to Point, the book had a paranormal twist to it where a character had pyrokinesis. And that actually fits with the first 2/3 of the book. But the agent said, hey, switch this over, make this more of a mainstream non-supernatural thriller, and we might have a chance of selling this. So I think he reworks the ending to make it non-supernatural, and it doesn't entirely click. It makes it feel almost soap opera-y in the way that the villain has their big monologue, and then the twist is revealed, and then another twist is revealed, and then there's this big showdown. Now, do not get me wrong. I enjoyed the melodrama of it all. But the writing changed at that point, and the characters sounded a lot more old-timey. The dialogue sounded much less natural than it had earlier in the book. And the pacing goes really wonky, and you start to lose track of where certain people are because this book has a very large cast. Still, if you are a fan of old school teen fiction, like the Point Horror books, I definitely recommend this one. It is a fun read. It's not a fast read. I was shocked. This is only like 170 pages. It's not a fast read. Pike's writing is surprisingly dense for this kind of book. That's not it's not bad though. I enjoyed it. But it's not as dialogue heavy as you would get with some of these books. There's a lot more description. There's a lot more setting up tension and place. And this one does have a good amount of tension. It has a good amount of atmosphere. You're in this mansion as they're snowed in by a blizzard. Like, it works really well. There's a real thrilling scene where Laura has to run. She's running out of the house and she's running through the blizzard, and she falls into like this ice pit, and like, it's really exciting. So there is a lot of strength in this book, and you could get hints of where he would be moving as he kind of advanced in his writing career, and where he could, once he was established, where he could kind of push boundaries. This is definitely a first book. Not in the worst, not in a bad way, but just in like, you could see he's testing the waters for the audience. Do I recommend this one? Yes. It is out of print, but it is not super hard to find. I found my copy for not a ton of money. I mean, it's not in pristine condition, but this is in perfectly readable condition. The pages are all together. And I think I paid like $6 plus shipping. You know, you're not going to get this for, I mean, you can probably find this maybe at library sales, stuff like that. This is old. Like I said, this book's about 40 years old. I think my copy is probably, I'm guaranteeing it's a reprint. Oh yeah, it's like well, this is a much later reprint. There is another version of this that has a different cover. It might be the UK edition, which is like a girl's face and there's like fire around her. It gives Carrie or Firestarter vibes. Definitely hinting at the more supernatural intentions of the original version of this book, which I don't know if he ever rewrote, because he would sometimes rewrite his books later. He wrote a book, one of my favorites. He did a book called Monster, which was kind of like an invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing, but it was quite gruesome and dark, and I loved it. That was another one that's out of print, and that one is actually harder to find. And I think that one is out of print because of some stuff that happens in it. And after Columbine, I think that it was too sensitive and they pulled it, because there's a character who goes on a shooting spree. But there's another book he did called The Hollow Skull that came out. Hollow Skull, not Hollow Scum. Hollow Skull that came out later, which is kind of a retread of that with a sci-fi twist. And I actually adore that book too. So this one, he kind of actually I'm getting the feeling that he kind of rewrote when he did Weekend. Another one that's out of print. A lot of his books are out of print, which I don't fully get. I don't know if he owns the rights to them. I do know a lot of Point authors have gotten the rights back to their books, so they're publishing them on print on demand and on ebooks and doing like Kindle Unlimited, which is great because it means these books are available again. I don't know if that's the same situation for him or if his library is owned by a different publisher just kind of sitting on them. Because his books dealt with some more serious topics, they might feel they're not appropriate to release, which is, come on. Like, yes, Die Softly involves someone being poisoned with laced cocaine. Yeah, it does. But, like, kids are seeing worse and reading worse all the time. And by the time I was reading his books, I was also reading adult horror fiction. I was reading more salacious stuff. So it fit right in, but this also gave me a more realistic view and a more intelligently handled cast of characters. That is actually one of the things I like about Pike, is I feel like he respects his audience. So he doesn't talk down to them. The characters, while still a little melodrama-y, feel more realistic than what you're getting from Fear Street. And I don't mean to pick on Stein. I love R.L. Stein. The Fear Street books, I adore them. I absolutely adore them. I reread them even now. I reread Prom Queen before the new movie came out. And I think I just read The Secret Bedroom not that long ago. Like, I do love Stein, but Stein's books are a very specific kind of YA book. His characters are very stock, and he even talks about this. He wants his character to be kind of a cardboard cutout so the reader can place themselves in that role. And I do understand that. But his characters are a little more stock. The plots are a little more Twilight Zone-y. And he didn't really push the boundaries when it came to more serious subject matter. And that's fine, nor did he need to. His books did definitely start getting more intense when it came to the violence. You really saw that in some of his trilogies, like Fear Park and stuff like that. Pike dealt with characters who worked in more of the real world. You had characters who had drug problems or drinking problems, or had parents who had drug or drinking problems, who came from unhappy homes. You don't get a lot of that here, but I think that's also just because you don't have a lot of time to develop the internal lives of this large cast of characters. So, do I recommend Slumber Party? Yeah, of course I do. It's Christopher Pike. He has way more hits than misses, and even if this wasn't one of my favorite ones of his, I definitely think it's worth a read, especially if you grew up reading him and you never read this one, because this one wasn't really available even when I was finding him. I had to hunt this down back then. So if you had never experienced his first book, give it a try. It is a short read, and while it's not the fastest read, it's still very enjoyable, and it's got tons of atmosphere. It's been getting colder around here. I'm filming this in late October, and it's kind of been great to read this where everything's snowed in, and like you get that atmosphere, and it works really well. So yes, I do recommend Slumber Party, and I recommend checking out more Christopher Pike books. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this video up here. It's gone on long enough. So, just a reminder, new videos come out here every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Love what you love, enjoy what you're reading and watching, and have an amazing morning, afternoon, or evening. And I will see you all in the next one.